Welcome into episode 476 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the two of you today spent time at Pine Hills Country Club for the Boston Foundation Charity Golf Tournament.
Yes.
Indeed. Yeah, down in Plymouth, a nice 2-hour drive and morning traffic from Lowell. So, just take half the day up on the road. That's fine. But it's always a good event to get out to, though. Especially for us, because we get, usually Don Sweeney talks, which he did this year. We get Marco Sturm, and then you get a few players, including this year, a few guys that we weren't able to get at captain's practices last week because they weren't in yet. With Hampus Lindholm, Elias Lindholm, Tanner Jeannot, talked to Pasta again, ran into Jeremy Swayman in the bathroom. So, just, kind of get to talk to everyone. So.
Yeah, I told Jeremy Swayman congrats on his engagement. I think right after Scott talked to him in the bathroom. That's the order of events. But we did to talk to a few people. It
was funny. Like we didn't even talk about his typical like guys being guys. It was like just talking about golf because we're at a golf course and life gets ignored.
Yeah, and then he comes out of the bathroom and I'm like, congrats. And he's like, oh, thank you. And then he walks away. So,
he's like the guy in there. The guy in there said he liked my watch next to me in the urinal. That was pretty weird.
No.
Total, that's the total epitome of what conversations girls have versus what conversations guys have. It's like only about sports, like only about golf when we're on the golf course, where like me and whoever would just be like, talk about their lives. But anyway, yes, Swayman did get engaged this week. In case people missed that, he was happy about that. I talked to him about that, but there was definitely some stories to come out of the availability. There was a lot of reporters there. Probably, we're really getting back into the full swing of, covering the team. Jeannot talked for the first time, but I guess I'll start with my opening shift, which was actually a question that Scott asked to Don Sweeney. He probably talked for 15 minutes. We got a lot of questions into him, so we covered a lot. But I'll just go over what he said about the captaincy, which we had talked about a few times. Doesn't seem like they're starting the season with a captain. And it seemed like Don Sweeney confirmed that today. And I'll just read the quote from his answer to Scott, which was, "We've been honest with everyone that we're going to start the season without it. We have a leadership group that's been meeting among themselves. I think eventually someone will emerge as the guy that should be the next captain."
Yeah, and like you said, like that is the confirmation that, again, we thought would be coming because, Charlie McAvoy had commented on, I think we're starting just with A's and no C, and Marco Sturm had hinted at it at one point, but now you actually get that confirmation that is how they're going to start the year. Obviously, there was no commitment as far as how long they're going to stick with that. Like, normally you would think, okay, well, that'll probably last for the season and then reevaluate. But it sounds like there, in theory, could be the opportunity for someone to even end up with the C this year. Like, I don't know, maybe you get halfway through the year or you get to the Olympic break and it's clear that, oh, Charlie McAvoy is the captain of this team, or David Pastrnak is the captain of this team. So which is something I guess I hadn't really thought of, potentially naming one mid-season, and I don't think that will happen, but it could be in play.
Unlikely.
Yeah, so we'll get more into that. My opening shift was about another thing that Don Sweeney talked about, which we've spent a lot of time on, and that is the opportunity, or depending on your view, lack of opportunity for young players this coming training camp and preseason. And, Sweeney said something that he has said in past years, which is about young players. They should have their ears pinned back. Guys can go out and take advantage of opportunities. And he mentioned by name, like Fabian Lysell getting an opportunity at the end of last season, playing 12 NHL games. He name dropped Dansla Schmelis and Fraser Minton within that answer. So noted that he started that answer by commenting on something he had seen written that seemed to suggest that Matt. Now I don't even know what he was referencing, honestly, but that seemed to suggest that Matt Poitras is like at the end of his development or has hit his ceiling or something. And he was like, I find that funny because he's still only 21 years old, which I would agree with. So I don't really know where that was coming from, but yeah. So, mentioned a lot of the names that we've been talking about. And again, where I think fans get frustrated with this is they feel like Sweeney says one thing, which is, yeah, they all have an opportunity. If they go out there and win a job, we'll give them a job. And then fans think that these players, even if they perform in camp and outplay a veteran, there's examples where they don't get the job and they get sent down to Providence in lieu of the veteran player getting to start the year in Boston. And that's something that we've touched on. We can get into like some of the reasons why that happens. And I guess just how much stock we put into Sweeney's comments, and do we think he's, actually being truthful about the opportunity that some young players are going to have?
Yeah, he brought that up kind of on his own when asked about certain things. Like he was asked about young players, but then during other answers, he brought them up on his own. Thought it was interesting that he brought Dan Melis, which I thought was pronounced Don Melis, up on his own. When he started talking about younger guys, he was like the first guy on the list that he brought up. He mentioned Poitras's development on his own, kind of, not prompted to. Nobody asked about Matt Poitras. He just started talking about his development and kind of mentioned that he could be an example for guys that you can make it out of camp. His comments on youth were worth noting, and we'll get into it more, I guess, once we're out of opening shifts.
Yeah, and just quickly on the youth, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Scott and another gentleman who asked Don Sweeney a question, because those questions were catered for me. I mean, in a matter of 2.5 minutes, Marat Husnadinov and Dan Melis were both asked about, and I said to Bridget before we started recording, I had to look at the calendar to make sure it wasn't Christmas, because I'm like, what's going on right now? So that was fun to hear. But yeah, my opening shift is going to be a little bit more lighthearted, and destiny has taken place today, and we now know for sure that Nikita Zadorov and Henry Jokiharju have to be a D pair this year, because they both got a hole-in-one in the same week. Can we talk about how insane and how rare that is? If that's not a sign that those two should play together this year, guys, I'm not sure what is. So we can talk about those two playing together. And then, Bridget, you mentioned the Hampus Lindholm interview. We were talking before we started recording. And then Charlie McAvoy is over in Vegas doing some PR stuff for the Bruins. And we could just talk about the decor in general. Obviously, not mentioned was in that last sentence or two was Mason Lohrei and Andrew Peeke as well, part of that grouping. So heading into the season, we could just maybe touch on what their top six is going to look like and the confidence that we have in them to maybe bounce back with hopefully some full health.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's interesting. I'm thinking back to captain's practices, and again, I told you guys, I really try not to read too much into captain's practice, but I did, and they were switching up D pairs quite a bit. But at one point, there was a pretty consistent stretch where it was Zadorov and Peeke together, and Lohrei and Jokiharju, and I think that was the day that McAvoy wasn't out there. It was the second one that media got to go to. But like, obviously that could mean nothing. I mean, that could even just be as simple as like Lohrei and Jokiharju didn't play together much last year, and maybe they want to get a little bit of ice time together. And, because like ultimately you have to have familiarity with everyone of the opposite handedness, because there's going to inevitably be mixing and matching. But yeah, the Zadorov Jokiharju thing with the hole-in-ones, that does have to feel like some sort of sign. Like
if there's a time in Bridget to get a hole-in-one, it's got to be when you have a professional franchise and their media team filming pretty much every move out there, you have to imagine that that's on film somewhere.
Pressure, though, right? Doesn't that make it more pressure?
Yeah, sure. But like, how many times out there does somebody get a hole in one, an amateur golfer,
0
and
times in this tournament.
and you don't know that it's obviously you never know when it's going to happen. But at least professionals, there's always cameras rolling. There's amateurs all the time that you get lucky and you get a hole in one, but nobody's filming because nobody knows to film every shot. But Yoki Haru has the Bruins media team there. I'm sure that's got to be on film. Potentially, it might not be, but there's a good chance it may have been.
Well, I haven't seen a shot that I've seen the picture of him, like, holding the ball like I did it. But when we talked to Bob Sweeney before, somebody asked, it might have been Scott.
I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it might have been Scott. Has anyone got a hole in one here? And he said no. So this is the first ever in 24 years, something like that, over 20 years of this foundation event going on that someone has got a hole in one.
Well, and last year they even did, because Trent Frederick had gotten a hole in one last summer leading up to this event. And last year they did a hole in one contest where they picked, I forget which hole it was, but whichever one was like the shortest, par 3, and did like a hole in one challenge where they would all the players would just go through and were teeing off, and they could have multiple attempts. And not even outside of like the tournament, just with multiple chances to try to get it. No one did. I think Matt Potter came the closest. But yeah, now this year you actually get it.
Well, Scott, there's your next non-controversial WEEI headline. Are Bruins players better at golf than hockey? Listen, I'm not saying you're saying that, but that could be the headline.
But that, Brian, you're missing the spin of, oh, well, that's only because they have so much time to play golf this offseason.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, have you ever came close to a hole in one, either one of you?
No, I don't play enough.
I'm not talking mini golf. I'm talking regulation 18.
Nailed several hole in ones in mini golf, but no, not really.
Pirates Cove's my course.
Yeah, the closest, like I said, like I really just don't play enough. But the closest I got was actually this summer. It was like I don't know, 160, 170 yard par 3, and my tee shot ended up less than 10 feet from the hole, and like I was just happy with that and putted in for a birdie. That I'm like, that's like a once every 5 years shot for me, so that's good enough.
Yeah, I've come within a foot before. I've come maybe 8 or 9 inches, but of course I didn't birdie it. I ended up parring it. So hey, it is what it is. That's the life of a 16 handicap, All right. I also want to plug real quick before we continue that the second half of this episode we'll answer some mailbag questions. We do have about 3 or 4 we'll get to. So if you sent us some questions, we'll get to those as well later on. But if you guys don't mind, I'd like to start with the leadership, right? And Bridget, this was your opening shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say, I don't think either one of us are surprised that they're entering the year. Maybe earlier on in the summer we would have been, but I think as the summer kind of progressed, I think we saw the tea leaves that they were going to enter the year with no captain. And, I can't say it's a bad way to go about it, because I think recency bias has people a little bit down on Charlie McAvoy, right? And you see some people online in response to Scott's video say, well, what's there to figure out? David Pastrnak is the next captain of the Boston Bruins. He's right in front of you. And I'm not discrediting the validity to Pasternak's argument, but for a long time, since the moment he debuted in the NHL in the 2017 playoffs, right until current day, but more so a couple of years ago, Charlie McAvoy had future captain written all over him. And how quick people are to kind of forget that element and portion of his career. Now, he has been inconsistent the last couple of years, and he's dealt with some injuries. Notably, last season, he missed the whole second half. Well, much of the second half, certainly after 4 Nations. You combine that with David Pastrnak, he has had 3 consecutive 100-plus point seasons, averaging 46 points more than the Bruins' next highest scorer in a given year over that stretch. And then off the ice, after the last year's trade deadline sell job, when Marchand in particular is traded away, McAvoy's on the shelf, Lindholm's on the shelf, Pastrnak was there to pick up the pieces and be that spokesperson. He also hasn't missed a game in 3 years. So all the momentum in the world is there for Pastrnak, the next captain. But at the same time, what none of us here know is, does he want to be the captain? Would he prefer to just kind of wear an A and let Charlie be the captain? So I just think that the combination of McAvoy, the majority of McAvoy's career, and the last 3 years of Pastrnak just being otherworldly, I think it just sets up a good, clean slate to start this season. And as Sweeney said, let's just see who emerges as the next leader. But there's a lot of people out there that are saying, why wait? Just name Pastrnak now. And I would just say, if he, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. If he doesn't want the role necessarily, you don't want to be too quick to put the C on somebody prematurely. You want to make the most well-informed decision possible.
I mean, my read on it for that is, not only do they not really, have a clear number one, I think Pastrnak, to me, would be ahead just because seniority and what he's been able to do. And like you mentioned last year, being there present on the ice when Marchand left and being a leader on the ice then. But I think also there's value in having these guys come together and work together as leaders. So that's been a topic that Sweeney mentioned, that a few of the other, McAvoy and Pastrnak mentioned themselves, that it's going to take an entire group of leaders, a hierarchy, like come together and pull on the rope together kind of thing. I think maybe it's kind of a galvanizing thing. Like maybe the idea is put all the brains together. Don't let one person think they're in charge. Let all of them kind of come together, work together, get to know each other, create chemistry, feel like it's all of theirs to add to and bring to the table. So like nobody's left out, nobody's excluded. And also a little bit of competition. Make McAvoy have his best season ever, Pastrnak have his best season ever. Those guys, not necessarily that they don't have anything against each other, but one of them is going to beat the other one out at some point. It's not going to be a captainless team for very long. Maybe after the season, Scott mentioned maybe during the season. I think that's unlikely. But anyway, I can see the benefit to, first of all, wanting it to be kind of a group effort, and second of all, maybe bringing out another level in either of those guys, trying to prove that it's them that should be captain.
Yeah, I can see some benefit to that. Neither one of them can defer, right? Like if they're co-leaders, they have to work together and figure out how they're running the team and come together on decisions. Whereas you put the C on one of them, like, does Pastrnak say, oh, okay, like Charlie's got this? Or if you give it to Pastrnak, Charlie kind of takes a back seat and says, all right, Pasta's got this. That said, I would also point out that if you have captain, like, you have a captain sitting there, you don't hesitate to give them the C. I mean, they gave Zdeno Chara the C the day they signed him. And he had not been a captain in Ottawa, but they looked at him, they said, this is captain material. Chara presented them with a clear plan of how he wanted to run the room, and they bought it. And obviously that worked out pretty well for everyone. So I guess I would say, if they were completely sold on one or the other, or one of those guys went to them and said, like, listen, whether you're giving me the C or not, like, here's everything I want to do to lead this team, maybe you would have a decision now. So I wonder if, there could be part of this decision that's, hey, we don't have to rush into this, so let's not rush into it. But I also think part of it is like they're genuinely not sure, and that doesn't have to mean anything bad. Like this may very well work out where they give it a little bit of time, and come next summer they're more sure of it. But I also think like it's fair to have at least a little bit of uneasiness looking at it from the outside, thinking like, well, there's clearly at least some level of doubt as to like that there's a reason that every team has a C. There's a reason that there's very few teams that don't have a captain. I brought up the example on here earlier this summer of the Carolina Hurricanes. I think this was around 2017, 2018, who went through a whole season without a C, and players at the end of the year gave feedback to management that they thought they needed a C. And then they decided to give out 2 C's, which didn't really solve the problem. But like, there's a reason that every team likes to get to having 1 C. There's a reason that's been the standard for a long, long time. And I think if they were sure that one of these guys is their next captain, then I think in a perfect world, they probably would be naming him right now. So, sorry. So I think there has to be at least a little bit of doubt there.
Well, so I will say, Brian, before I'm sorry, I know we haven't had a chance to talk in a second, but I think that probably the main issue where that can go wrong is when there's confusion and when there's multiple guys, like when they butt heads, the 2 guys that are like, maybe we're the captain, they butt heads and they're like, no, you listen to me, no, listen to me. I haven't got the sense that that's how this year is going to play out for McAvoy and Pastrnak. I think they both seem comfortable.
Yeah, but I mean, but you wouldn't get that sense now. Like,
yeah,
no one plans to butt heads, but you hit a 5-game losing streak, and maybe you do.
Yeah, I absolutely. But I will say maybe some teams don't articulate before the season well enough. You guys have to work together and figure it out together, rather than one guy says one thing, the other guy contradicts him. So I think there has been communication based on what Sweeney said, based on what Pasta said, based on what McAvoy said, on them coming together, talking about it together, and then giving a message after. So, I mean, obviously things can fall apart at some point, any point during the season. There could be disagreements, but I also think maybe forward group, defensemen, like they're a little bit separate. They're not going to have the same crossover necessarily as 2 forwards would, or what have you. So maybe this isn't a situation where you're going to have as much confusion, is what I'm trying to say. If those guys really do make an effort to talk to each other before they then pass on the message, rather than yelling out what they want in the middle of a game or anything like that. I think that there's a chance that this doesn't cause as much confusion maybe as the Carolina situation.
Well, what you don't want to have happen in this situation where you have no captain is you don't want Pastrnak and McAvoy so focused on showing that they're the guy to be the next captain that it becomes a distraction for them and their teammates, right? Like, that's the one thing you don't want to have happen. I'm not saying that would happen, but that's what you don't want to have happen. You want guys to naturally be themselves and just see who emerges. And especially for an original 6 team, it's not ideal, I'm sure, from the Bruins perspective, to not have that set spokesperson and leader, that on ice and off ice leader for the media, for the players, all that stuff. I think that, they would like to have that guy in place. But I think what happened is, guys, and this is not me knowing for sure, I'm just kind of reading between the lines here. I think what happened is the Bruins thought they knew who the next captain was going to be for a long time. I think they thought it was going to be McAvoy for much of 2017 through 2022 even. Like, I think they thought, we know David's a superstar forward, but Charlie's kind of that physical 2-way defenseman, something as simple as just like a lack of language barrier when having us do a ton of media. His personality seems to be a little bit more like, hop on my back, guys. But I think that perception has kind of changed because David Pastrnak has forced everybody to look at what he's done, in particular the last 3 years, how much he has led on the ice, the gap between him and the Bruins' next best point producer in a given year, and the fact that he hasn't missed a game in 3 years. You combine that with McAvoy's injuries and his inconsistencies, and now the Bruins are sitting there saying, is it David? Right? Is it David? And then and I think that's why we're kind of in a situation where I genuinely think the Bruins, what they thought they knew, they're not so sure. And now let's give ourselves a clean slate to see who comes out on top here naturally. Who's the guy?
Yeah. I think there's something to that for sure. That makes a lot of sense, and it lines up with stuff we've heard over the years, and the comments that surfaced last year from Andy Brickley about people in the Bruins wanted to be McAvoy. Like, yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And again, like, I'm not saying it's a mistake to wait. I think it makes a lot of sense to wait if you do have any doubt. All I'm saying is, like, it is worth noting that this is not the ideal situation. Right. The ideal situation is you know who your captain is, you name them captain, and you go from there. Right. Like, Zdeno Chara leaves, they knew Patrice Bergeron was the next captain. Bergeron retires, they knew Brad Marchand was the next captain. In a perfect world, the moment you decide to trade away Brad Marchand, you know who your next captain is. So it doesn't mean it's a disaster that they don't know. I'm just saying it's not ideal that they don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us went into this saying, this is it's okay that they have, two guys. It would have in a perfect world have been more obvious, I guess. But I do think that they throw Pasta out there for the hard questions. And maybe only because McAvoy wasn't available, but even when he was last year, I feel like Pasta normally gave pretty good answers. They could count on him to not say anything that was controversial. They could count on him to represent the team. They could count on him to not be a it's about me kind of person. And I don't know. I think that he certainly over the last year has made a great case for himself, whereas maybe McAvoy hasn't had a chance to. So that in and of itself, McAvoy not being there caused question. And so this is where we are.
And like I said, if there was a situation where the Bruins felt or wanted the next leader to be McAvoy, it might not be necessarily a slight to David. Maybe they know something that we don't. Maybe they want it to be McAvoy because maybe David doesn't want that responsibility, and they know that and we don't. So it's easier for everybody for everybody to want it to be Charlie. But then shit happens, and David has just stepped up so much in the last 3 years that it's the world. We all get to see it happen. So it's not like it's behind closed doors. We see the on ice production. We see everything. So when you have a whole fan base, when you have a lot of the fan base being 88's the guy, it's tough to be like, no, it's actually Charlie after last year in particular. But if Charlie steps up again this year and bounces back, then you'd have less people being like, oh, Pasta was snubbed, right? So again, I just think they're biding time for the situation. And let me ask you guys this, though, because one thing that people will comment as well online towards me, and I'm sure you guys at different points, is, well, the next captain isn't even in the room right now. He's not even on the team. And to that, I would say, all right, so who is it? Is it Dean Letourneau or Connor McDavid? Which one of the guys that's on the, you know what I mean? Like who is it then? And I know that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek question I gave you guys, but
Connor McDavid, haven't you guys heard he's not re-signing with the Oilers, so he's going to be out there. Bruins are going to get him, give him a C as part of the deal.
So, but let me spin it to a realistic question for you guys, though. Is there any possibility that the next captain is in the room and it's not either of the two guys we've been talking about in Pastrnak or McAvoy? Are we glossing over that possibility? I don't think we are, but I mean,
are we overlooking somebody else that could have potential? You're saying?
Yeah, like a Hampus Lindholm or a Nikita Zadorov. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, sometimes somebody said to me online today that prior to him being traded away, that his dark horse for the next captain was Brandon Carlo, who obviously is in Toronto now. But like,
and Charlie Coyle.
When Don Sweeney says, because Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, because it was your question, but Scott didn't. I mean, Don didn't specifically say we'll see who emerges between David and Charlie. He just said we'll see if somebody emerges. So I mean,
Right.
he left the door open that it could be somebody else we're not anticipating.
Yeah, I guess. I have a hard time imagining anyone else in that room getting a C, like jumping McAvoy and Pasternak in line to get the C. I can't see it. Like unless there's stuff going on in that room that somehow I've missed. I just can't imagine it would be anyone other than one of them two.
Well, you're just gonna act like Husnudinov doesn't exist. I mean, what are we doing here? Are we having a podcast? We having a podcast? Like, what's going on?
I mean, I can see people looking really far down the road on like who has long-term deals, but like Pasta and McAvoy both still have term. Like obviously Zadorov and Lindholm signed contracts last year. They have term. Hagen's got drafted. Maybe people are thinking eventually it'll be Hagen's, whatever. But that there's so much time in between when I think those guys would take over and now. And I also think I was going to say this before you asked the question, is there someone else maybe besides the two we're talking about, that it could just come down to just naturally who people gravitate to this year. Like, who do people gravitate to when they need advice? When they just watch the dynamics of the room. I mean, we all played sports. We've all been on teams where all of a sudden, not even all of a sudden, like you get players that are just feel more connected or, more inclined to follow a certain person because they resonate or what have you. There's a human element, there's a social element that we probably won't see because it's going to be in the room, practice days, in the intermissions, whatever. People just gravitate towards a person, and that could be the person.
I mean, there's examples around the league, past and present, where you look at the captain of a given NHL team and it's got to be their best player, right? No. Is Nick Foligno Chicago's best player? No. Is Adam Lowry Winnipeg's best player? No. Was Andrew Ference Edmonton's best player back in 2013? No. Like there are examples of, now again, it's Pasternak or McAvoy. Okay. I asked the question just to cover all bases. We know it's one of those two guys. And I do believe that ultimately you have to lead by example on the ice as well. And I think that's probably something that Scott would echo. So yeah, maybe there's somebody that people gravitate towards in the room. Like maybe Zadorov becomes a big guy in that room. Like, from a leadership perspective, obviously literally he is, but you have to produce on the ice. I think to a certain level. And so I do think it's one of 73 or 88, Scott.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, I know, like I see a couple people on social media, fans from time to time, throw Zadorov out there as like he should be captain. And I don't know, like I don't really see it. I think Zadorov can be like a good kind of secondary support type of leader. I don't see him being captain again. Maybe like there's just stuff there that I'm missing, but I'm not sure he's the guy that you would want wearing the C. I think
not now. At least.
No,
not now. Like timing wise, he's only been here a year, and it wasn't a good year. Not saying it was his fault, but just it wasn't a good year. It was a year they missed the playoffs. It was a year that they lost a lot of guys at the trade deadline. It was just timing wise. Even if Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov are great leaders, that this captaincy came up like, and all of us have experienced this in our work life. Sometimes a job comes up and you're not in the right position to take it. You watch it and it's like, no, I'm not the obvious person to fill in here. So secondary leadership for sure. And that could be even more important on a team that may go throughout a season without a captain the whole time. So those guys might even be able to fill more of the air with their thoughts, in a kind of a group setting of leadership.
All right, so let's transition to Scott's opening shift, which is just the internal competition among younger players as we approach training camp. There's a lot of viable options for not a ton of spots. So, Scott, what's your number one takeaway from Sweeney's answers today about some of the younger players?
Well, again, like I think it just creates the discussion of, are those opportunities really there? Like it's one thing to say that they are, it's another for them to actually be there. Like, and I guess what this comes back to is what does it, people can have different opinions of like, what does it look like to win a job? Because in my mind, a young player should have to go above and beyond. Like, I'm fine with having veterans and having internal competition and forcing a young player to step up and steal a job from one of them. To me, that makes sense. But I think there's the other approach, and I'm not even saying it's wrong, of like, well, if it's a tie, it should go to the young guy because you need to start developing young guys for the future. Which like I get, but I think that's where fans get frustrated is like they see two players who seem close, or maybe even the young player has a slight edge, and they want that job to go to the young player. And that's where I think we kind of know like where Don Sweeney leans on those because we've seen him defer to the veteran enough over the years. The question, and one we mentioned on the last podcast, is like, where will Marco Sturm lean? Like, what will his advice be to when he sits down with Don Sweeney? If, two players are, say it's Fraser Minton and Mikey Esamon are pretty close for, spot in the lineup. Which one does Marco Sturm prefer? Which way does he lean? And I think those are things like we don't really know and would only be guessing at the moment.
Yeah, and Sweeney mentioned that the difficulty is you have to take someone's job if you want to make a roster at the NHL level. And you could say that about other levels too, but it's particularly true at the highest level. And you're not just gonna camp. Camp is it's short. Like, you have a short amount of time to really stand out amongst the rest, which is why we've talked about, if all things are considered equal between some of these fringe roster players, if you're waiver exempt, like in particular, you really have to have a strong camp compared to some of the guys next to you, because if you have an equal camp to the guy next to you, because of just asset management throughout the organization, it might just be easier to send a waiver exempt player down to Providence to start the year. And whereas obviously we've talked about this in previous episodes. So Matt Patra, you have to have an outstanding camp if you want to make the team, despite the fact that you made it 2 years ago. You have to remake it. And the same goes for some of the other players. And Dan Zloshmelis, who Sweeney brought up, Bridget mentioned this before we started recording. He brought him up unprompted, and then Scott, I believe you followed up with a question on Loshmelis. So the fact that Loshmelis is just coming out of Sweeney's mouth tells you he's a player that the Brewers are watching. It is his first training camp. It's his first pro camp. And we've talked about that too, which is why I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with the opportunity, previously being at UMass at this time of year. So yeah, it's you want to make the team, you have to be head and shoulders above the competition in a brief, short training camp.
Yeah, and he'll be at the rookie challenge. Fraser Minton will also be at the rookie challenge. So that was a guy I was a little bit surprised, but there's guys to watch there. And if we've talked about Dan Zloshmelis, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes. He's come up a lot in our off-season topics of conversation. If you're curious about him and you want to watch that rookie challenge, he will be there. And rookie camp starts tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday. There's going to be rookie practice, and then they're going to go off and do the rookie challenge. So there's opportunity for you guys to look at him yourself. But I did think you could read a little bit into some of the comments that Sweeney made about the free agents, which is a question I asked him about, why, I think my question was along the lines of, you mentioned that you want the bar to be raised this season. You want the floor to be raised this season. What do you think that the free agents can do to help that? And he brought up Imagn, he brought up Jeannot being physical. He wants it to be more physical. He wants protectors, was one of the things he said. He wants guys that can go out there and make sure that, they can stop maybe some physical plays against some of the smaller guys. Scott, I don't know what you thought about that answer, but he did bring up, he didn't say enforcers, but it was basically like, these guys are going to hold you accountable.
Yeah, I mean, right. And we heard that when he signed some of these guys about, you make comments about like creating space for young guys. And again, I'm a little skeptical of the NHL still operating that way. Certainly not in like the true enforcer mode, but even in terms of, like can having more physical plays in your lineup just open up space. And like obviously it can, so I don't totally dismiss that, but yeah, that is clearly something that they've put attention on this offseason is, they want to have guys out there who can punish other teams, who can make them think twice about going into the corner, who can, inflict some damage on the forecheck, who can respond if someone takes a run at Pasternak. Like, yeah, they want all that. And then I think they believe that, once they kind of establish that foundation, then you can mix in more skill on top of that in the months and years to come. So again, I think that only gets you so far. Like if you can't score enough, then it doesn't really matter how physical you are. Like teams are still going to run all over you and they'll take a hit if they're winning 5-2. But like I get where the thinking comes from. We'll see how it plays out. Like I've been skeptical of their whole approach this offseason and how effective it's actually going to be. I remain pretty skeptical. So, like to me, it's like I have to see it actually work on the ice and see them again, because I just don't think this team's gonna have enough offense. So it's like you have to score enough to win some games and be competitive. And I think like if they start losing and they're behind the 8 ball, then it doesn't really matter, how much you can bury someone in the corner. Like that's not going to ultimately create a productive winning atmosphere.
So Scott, I understand what you're saying, and I don't mean to put you on the spot too much here, but what exactly, and I want you to be mindful of the landscape this offseason around the league, right? Free agency wasn't anything special. Hockey trades don't really grow on trees. Like, what exactly did you want them to do this off? I can hear you say, well, don't sign Tanner Jeannot. I understand that, but like, what players were out there that could have pushed that needle all that much offensively in one off season? Because I do think what you're saying is true, but I do think they have a little bit more from the pre-existing roster, especially when they're healthy, than we're all probably giving them credit for. I mean, you do have Pasternak, you do have McAvoy and Lindholm and some others, and we do now know that they have James Higgins in the wings, and their prospect line is getting better. And I'm sure that they still know that even outside of Higgins internally, that externally they still are at least another true top 6 forward short. I get all of that. But like, what exactly could they have done that drastically this past offseason other than just try to be a tougher team to play against with some younger players in the wings coming up?
Well, specifically, like as it relates to the Jeannot contract, like I was an advocate for leaving yourself some flexibility. Like I wonder if part of, let me say this. I don't think you need to spend to the cap every year when you're in retool mode. this team spent to the cap, and that's great. They get to then say we spend to the cap every year. Truth. Like, that's not a lie. You can't argue against that. But I don't know how much hockey sense that makes right now, because yeah, okay, maybe that move wasn't out there. I would point out, like, we didn't even hear anything about them being a serious player for Mitch Marner or Nick Ehlers. I know Brock Besser didn't even get to the market, but I don't know, like, if you really want, say you really wanted Brock Besser, we all know these teams talk through back channels. So, like, could you, Besser signed the day before free agency, or was it even the day of free agency? It might have been the morning of.
I think so.
Yeah. So it's like, you can plant the seed of, like, hey, we'll be the highest bidder for you. Like, don't take the hometown discount to stay in Vancouver. Here's what we'll give you. Like, I know it's, it's not legal. You can't acknowledge that stuff, but, like, we all know it happens. So,
and Ehlers wasn't going to Boston or any other market similar because he wanted the lifestyle.
Again, so okay, so let's say, all right, it wasn't going to happen this summer. Just wasn't, the move wasn't out there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, there's still talk that Jason Robertson might get traded before opening night. So, like, there's another name, a clear top six forward. There's rumors about what is Kyle Connor's future in Winnipeg. But this team right now doesn't have the cap space to make a trade like that.
But do you want to just, like, leave that to chance that those rumors are?
Well, but this is my point, is when you leave yourself flexibility, because you say, you know what, we're not a cup contender this year anyways. So what if we have $5 or $6 million in cap space left? Then if that situation presents itself and it turns out Jason Robertson's interested in Boston or Kyle Connor's interested in Boston, now you can make a move. Like, now you have the flexibility to pounce. When you spend to the cap and you fill in with veteran bottom sixers, you don't. So, like, now it's, well, we'll try again next summer. And it's like, well, stuff can present itself between now and next summer that, to me, where the Bruins are in a retool, they should be in a position to be able to pounce if that presents itself. Like, Carolina could trade for Mikko Rantanen last year because they had like $8 million in cap space.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, ultimately that didn't work. He didn't sign an extension. They had to flip him again. But, like, you want to be the kind of team where, who knows, like, all these guys we're talking about in the summer of 2026 who, hey, maybe they get to free agency, or maybe they get traded in December because their team says, you know what, we don't get the sense he's going to re-sign here and we're not going to lose him for nothing, so we're going to trade him now. Are the Bruins in position to pounce on a situation like that?
Aren't you someone who in the past said that if there really was something like that, they'd figure it out, though? Like,
Don Sweeney has said that, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, they trade.
I mean, easier said than done. This is my, like, yeah. I'm just saying, the Carolina Hurricanes acquiring Mikko Rantanen was easier to do because they had cap space. That doesn't mean there's no way they could have done it without cap space, but it was easier to do because they didn't have to make the money match.
So your point is understood, Scott, and thanks for answering that you would just not spend to the cap if it was up to you. But so here's the thing, and this kind of ties it back to the leadership conversation earlier. They definitely signed one or too many bottom six options. And again, maybe they aren't even all here when the season starts. But I do think that they did bring in Michael Eyssimont and Sean Kuraly and Tanner Jeannot, because not only are they missing some offense, which was harder to come by this offseason, they're severely missing leadership and guys that understand how to be professionals. They bottomed out last year. Let's not forget that. They traded away not just a great player in Brad Marchand, but a great leader, and they traded away leadership in Coyle and Carlo, and they did have to bring back some leadership throughout this rebuild process too. And I guess, like, you need both. So which one do you need first, right? Do you need the right culture in the room first and then offense, or do you need that top 6 forward first, and then culturally, like which one is better to have first, and also which one is easier to have first. And I think that the answer was pretty apparent, that it was easier to address some good character players, because that Jason Robertson, Kyle Connor situation that you bring up is less of a sure thing, especially on July 1. And they did need to fill out their roster with leadership. We talked about at the beginning of this podcast, McAvoy and Pasternak, but one of them isn't even deemed worthy enough as the captain right now. So clearly leadership is being ironed out. So again, this team needed so much. They still need a lot, but it just only so much could have been done in the offseason. And I don't really know where that brings us to button up this conversation. But I do think that they spent what they had to. They spent more than you probably were comfortable with, Scott, because they did want to bring in Kuraly and Jeannot because of the leadership that they bring, as opposed to, like, I don't think John Farinacci or Riley Duran on the cheap in those roles are bringing those leadership qualities that they did pay top dollar for in free agency. But hey,
not to button up the conversation, but to move it forward, I guess, with another comment that Sweeney made was that he said we were caught flat-footed after the deadline with leadership not being there, right? Like, you traded away the leaders. Marchand, Coyle, Carlo, those were all guys that were voices in the room. And he said, we brought in Sean Kuraly because he has played with some of the best Bruins of all time. He played with Bergeron. He's played with Char. He's played on that 2019 team that made it all the way to the final. Like, he specifically singled out Kuraly as somebody who he wants to give that message, what it was like then when he was on the Bruins the first go around. So I guess another angle of what he's looking at from free agents to bring leadership.
Yeah, which I would say, like, you have to be careful with, like, and I think Sean Kuraly is the kind of player who gets this, but you can't be referencing the past too much, because that might not mean a whole lot to a 22 or 23-year-old kid. Like
who's Nadinov doesn't probably
right. Like, you can't
leave him out of this, please.
Like, pulling the, like, back in my day card sometimes doesn't always go over well with younger players. And by the way, that's something that Charlie McAvoy even alluded to last week when we talked to him, where he was caught himself talking about, like, yeah, the younger generational players, and he's like, man, I sound so old right now. But like, it's true. Like, yes, you want to keep certain things that you had then and that you learned from those guys, but you also have to pass it on in a way that young players don't feel like you're just, like, reaching for something from 7 years ago, where they're like, the hell do I care about that? Like, we're in 2025. And then just quickly, I will note that since we brought him up, we have not seen or heard from Sean Kuraly these last couple of weeks. There sadly is a good reason for that. His father passed away a few days ago. So he's been back home for all of that stuff. His father, Rick, by the way, actually, like, legendary hockey player himself at Miami of Ohio, which is also where Sean Kuraly went, having grown up in Ohio. I think Rick is still Miami's all-time leading goal scorer in program history. So he's been dealing with that.
Yeah, he was. I remember, I mean, I used to work in Miami, Ohio. So we talked about Sean a lot, but we talked about Rick a lot too, because nobody had been able to pass some of his records there. And so those two, just as a family, were kind of like the 1 and 2 guys from the program that people were really excited about and people talked a lot about. So yeah, that's very unfortunate. We mentioned last week that he wasn't at captain's practice. Well, it sounds like this has, been going on. So yeah, that's unfortunate. But just to finish my last thought on Kuraly as a leader and in the comments that Sweeney made, I don't know if he necessarily means Kuraly is going to come in and be like, we got to do it like back then, but more so just that he already has the culture ingrained. And learned from those guys how to be a sounding board, when to step in, when to let people grow, just that kind of thing. Just kind of he absorbed it, and maybe he can bring a little bit of that without maybe bringing up specifics of times gone by.
All right, you guys want to get to maybe two mailbag questions to close out the episode?
Sure.
All right, so let's start with Scott in Seattle, because Scott brings up a question that I've been asked about. I'm sure you guys have been asked about as well over the summer. This hypothetical situation. Scott says, "Love the show. Thanks for making the offseason bearable and entertaining." Well, Scott, thank you for listening. He says, "I'm ready to go for the Bees to have a very good year. Don't think they will be awesome or contend for the Stanley Cup, but definitely better than a train wreck they were last year. Curious to hear your thoughts on Mason McTavish and what a trade with Boston might look like. McTavish could be a good hard-nosed middle six forward to complement / partner with Higgins for years to come. What do you think it would take to navigate a trade with the Ducks?" His take is the Bruins get McTavish at $6 million a year for 5 years, and Anaheim gets Casey Middlestat, $5.5 million for 2 years. I mean, we'll have to look at that afterwards because that's not his current contract or whatever. And then Fabian Lysell and a Bruins 20-27 first round pick. I don't know if that's the Bruins' own first pick or if he's talking about Florida's, but in any event, Mason McTavish doesn't have a deal with the Anaheim Ducks. Bridget, Scott, I don't understand why they can't come to an agreement with the player. Anaheim has tons of cap space. Yes, they have some players to sign in some years to come. Cutter Gauthier, for example. Leo Carlson is another example. But I still think that they can find a way to fit these guys, whether or not it's at the term and AAV that the player might want, TBD. But I just find it unnecessary for Anaheim to move on from McTavish when they have all the money in the world right now. And what do you guys think about him?
Yeah, I mean, I like McTavish as a player. There had been kind of a weird rumor / whisper that he wasn't totally happy with some things the Ducks had done and maybe didn't know exactly where he fit in moving forward, which I do find a little odd because I look at that team and I'm like, well, he's clearly still a middle six forward there. Did he expect to be first line center, which I would say, is not really where he should be probably. I do think he's more of a, good second liner, great third liner on a good team. But yeah, I mean, it's still not done. And, here we are with start of training camps a week away. So I'm with you. I still feel like eventually they get something done. But until they do, it's fair to wonder. And as for that trade, just to repeat, Middlestat, Lysell, it says Bruins 2027 first. I would not give up any of the Bruins' own first round picks for Mason McTavish, because I just think while everyone hopes it's not the case, there is a chance that the Bruins' own picks the next couple years are very high. And there's a chance that those are lottery tickets at franchise-changing players. And while I like Mason McTavish, I don't like him that much. And I apologize for the motorcycle that just went by my window as I was finishing up that point. So.
Did you hear it? I didn't hear it.
Very slightly. Very slightly. But I agree with you, Scott. The Bruins picks that they acquired from Toronto and Florida as first rounders for the right player, I think all three of us are probably okay with one of those going. But yeah, those Boston picks, I think you want to hold on to those pretty tight, especially 2026's pick.
And it seems like Middlestat just always is the guy to go the other way. I mean, I understand the cap space. You mentioned that wasn't exactly, he's 5.75, not 5.5 per year. So that's what would be going out from the Bruins. That's kind of been the theme with a lot of our trade proposals we've gotten from listeners is Middlestat out. And understandably, his contract can match that deal with McTavish. So, you're trying to make the money work. Lysell he had as part of that deal, first round pick. That feels like a lot. I don't know about you guys, but that just feels like a lot.
Well, I think Anaheim might think that feels like a lot too. It might be why they're kind of at a stalemate. But I mean, I don't know. I think I'm just trying to pull it up again. 6 million for I don't think that's crazy. I mean, I think he's had a pretty good career for his youth, and
No, I mean, it feels like a lot to give up. Not the.
a lot to give up McTavish.
Yeah, Lysell, a first round pick in Middlestat.
I mean, to be honest, Bridget,
Nobody knows what Middlestat is right now.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't know if Lysell will ever be an NHL player.
Yeah.
So I mean, you'd be gambling on that. If you're the Bruins, that Lysell never pans out. So I mean, Middlestat, I think people are quick to kind of shit on him. I think last year with Boston, he played 18 games, didn't light it up, but also didn't have great line mates. And I'm not here to defend that. I'm not here to defend his time in Buffalo or Colorado. But Middlestat has scored at a over half a point per game pace in the NHL, 400 plus games into his career. He's only 26 years old. Like, I'm not saying the Bruins shouldn't trade Middlestat. I'm saying unless it's for a really good deal right now. First of all, I don't think his stock is that high. But if they want to trade him, I think the Bruins owe it to the Charlie Coyle trade to see if Middlestat can be something here in the first half of the season. And if it doesn't work out, then you can try to move him a little bit later. But if it was Middlestat and Lysell and a 27 first for McTavish, if it wasn't a Bruins owned 2027 first, then I would probably do that if it was like the Florida pick that the Bruins got. But if it's Boston's pick, I don't know about that.
No, not the Boston pick. But and also like I just feel like we don't genuinely have a good read on what he's going to be here. Middlestat meaning next year. It's a 2-year contract, so maybe the next 2 years if he's here the 2 years. Like we haven't seen enough. Personally, I'll speak for myself. I don't feel like I've had enough information of him in real meaningful games that I would be willing to, make a judgment on his value at this point. With that sample size, not being meaningful games, they're out of the playoffs. They were selling, it's hard for me to say that what I watched from him in person, I can make much of a judgment on.
I just think it's best for the Bruins to give Middlestat some time here because number one, he could possibly turn into a player that maybe the Bruins hope that he can be, and that benefits Boston. Or two, he improves and his stock and his trade value goes up, and you can dish him later on if you need to, and with possibly a better return. I don't love the idea of selling when his value is probably pretty damn low.
I mean, I don't need to rush into trading Middlestat. I'm not trading him just to trade him, but right. I would have no problem including him in this trade.
No.
Him, Lysell, like I'm fine with that part of the package. It's just that Bruins own first round pick. Like if that's the Toronto or Florida pick, then I still need to think of it, but I think ultimately I might pull the trigger on that. But I wonder like how appealing that package is to Anaheim. That would come down to like how much value they see in Middlestat and Lysell. Like if they look at Middlestat and say, it's not really the kind of player we're looking for right now. And if they look at Lysell and they say, we don't really think that's a very good prospect anymore. Well, then they're not doing the deal, period.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, if it's this deal, I'm fine with moving on from Middlestat. I'm more so talking about a lot of the chatter all summer. Just get rid of him. It's like, you're not just going to get rid of him. He's almost $6 million cap hit. He's like, get rid of him so that, Potter can take his spot. It's like, guys, it's not that simple. All right. Let's get to one final question here. From Liz. And you know what? Let's combine these two because they're both to do with captain's practice. So Liz asks, do Sweeney, Neely, and Sturm watch captain's practices? Are they allowed to? If so, what do they get out of it? Bridget and Scott, you guys can maybe answer that one real quick.
I mean, like, they were around. It's not like they have to be away from the facility or anything, but I don't think they're watching super intently because the captain's practices is not how they're going to evaluate these players. Like they're going to do that in training camp. So I don't, as far as I know, I don't think there's any rule against them watching if they want to and they happen to be there. But I also don't think they're not planning their days around it. Like they have other stuff that they're doing. So I did not see them watching much of the, if any of the two practices that we were at. And I don't think they would make a regular habit of it.
Yeah, they were around, but we didn't see them watching firsthand. Like that's all I can confirm.
Yeah. Although I did make a joke on Scott's video of them doing Herbies that Marco Sturm was watching on Live Barn, yelling again. But
yeah.
So Liz, thank you for that question, and then Kim has a question on captain's practice as well. Do Pasternak and McAvoy make the decisions as to who plays on what team and what position for scrimmages? Do any of the coaches have a say, or is it like what Patra said being interviewed? You just jump over the boards and roll with it, regardless of it's your preferred position or not.
Scott, do you know the answer to that? Like why some teams are so they split it up black and white, right? They wear the black and white jerseys. They're just scrimmage jerseys. They don't have names. They don't have numbers. It's hard for us to follow. I personally don't know the answer to who chooses the teams. I honestly thought sometimes there's like peripheral coaches that are there that kind of facilitate the before the practice. I don't know. I genuinely can't answer this question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. I don't think there's a whole lot of thought put into it. I think it is closer to like what Matt Patra said, where it's like you're kind of just going out there and, that they know they need a certain number of guys in dark jerseys and a certain number in white jerseys. And, maybe there's a couple combinations of guys who want to work together or, get some shifts on the same line or pairing or whatever. But
I think they try to make it even as well. Like, you guys have probably been to captain's practices for your own teams, back when you're in high school or whatever. They try to make it even. They'll, like we saw Pasternak and Zaka on opposite teams. Like we see they split some of the top 6 guys apart. They split some of the top defensemen apart. They try to get equal amount of rookies on either side. Maybe they want Pasternak to talk to Lysell or Patra so they're on the same team. I'm not sure if there's all that much thought that goes into it besides making sure it's somewhat even so that it's fair. Mostly what they did was scrimmage. So you don't want to have like a lopsided scrimmage.
Yeah, and I don't think any Boston coaches have any say. I think it is like captain's practices are not meant to be like a tryout or like a true practice. They're meant to kind of just get everyone together, some bonding, get some puck touches, and just start to like feel good about your hands, your timing going into the start of training camp. Make sure everyone's in shape. Like no one came back, which like I think used to be a problem back in the day when guys weren't on such strict summer programs. I would say is way less of a problem now. Like now, if anyone comes back out of shape, they stick out like a sore thumb. Like it just really doesn't happen much anymore. But yeah, it's just to kind of get everyone feeling good and kind of onto the same page heading into training camp. There's really not a whole lot of thought given to like, let's figure out what lines work and, like that's what training camp's for.
It's glorified stick and puck upon hockey.
Yeah.
Just getting their touches in and asking how their summer was and whatnot. Okay. Anything you guys wanted to go over before we sign out here?
No, I don't think so. I tweeted something out that maybe we can just touch on at some point. We don't have to do it today, but I just kind of started thinking because the Denver Broncos announced today that they are replacing their stadium that opened in 2001. which was the year before Gillette Stadium opened. And like we've seen like the Flyers are replacing their NHL and NBA arena that opened, I think either the same year or like within a year of TD Garden. We know like Fenway Park is its own animal, but I was just like thinking out loud about, at Gillette Stadium and TD Garden, they both have had a lot of work done in recent years. I don't think either one needs to be replaced or is particularly close to that, but I was just kind of like wondering, like, I wonder what their what their ultimate lifespan is going to be.
I mean, there's been plenty of other rinks that I've been to that are in so much worse shape that I'm like, that I don't think that it's coming.
But I'll say this: there's also now a lot of NHL rinks that are nicer than TD Garden.
Oh,
I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I would say TD Garden is probably as state of the art as you can probably even do in Boston right now. Anyway, I mean, if the Bruins were to have a different arena, where else in Boston would they put it? Probably on top of where they are right now. And I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars the Jacobs invested or more. I think maybe even in the billions for that Causeway Street project, renovations inside and out. I mean, you walk around TD Garden, inside TD Garden, it is completely unrecognizable. You feel like you're walking around like a Guardians of the Galaxy ride in Disney or something like that. It's not the TD Garden of even 2010 or 13. It's totally different. So I don't see how they could knock down TD Garden and rebuild it, certainly on the inside, any nicer than it is now or modern. So
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, you saw there's been a bunch of stuff that's happened. Even I've been doing this is gonna be my 5th season. In those 5 years, there's been a whole like renovation of one of the floors that's just this like big bar area that's someone will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, on the 9th floor or right underneath the 9th floor.
Yeah, underneath the 9th
Yeah.
floor.
It's like a Bud Light. It's like a Bud Light deck type thing.
Yeah, it's like that's new.
Heritage Hall.
Heritage Hall, definitely. We were just in there for the draft, brand new everything. These state of the art like projections of players and different stuff that they have in there. Not to say they couldn't move that or redo that, but it's just that there's been a lot of work done in the last 5 years.
The only thing that's the same
changed. The seats were all changed out.
Which was a misstep, by the way. They did not get that right.
I know. They should be gold. We all agree with
that.
No,
I mean the comfort factor. Like those seats are very uncomfortable. Like they didn't get it right.
Well, then they should redo it.
They're gonna have to redo it. They're gonna have to redo it at some point. It won't be soon because you just can't do that like twice in 5 years. But people who have sat in those load seats know what I mean. Like they're not comfortable.
Also, I don't know if they're going to be gold because the Celtics also play there. So,
well, the Celtics play there for now. We'll see if they get their own arena someday. Okay. But the Scott, I feel like the capacity increased. I feel like the seats got a little bit smaller, so that the capacity can increase a little bit.
Smaller. Leg space got smaller, and they added on the 9th floor. They added like a hangover section that comes down. So there's like a few extra rows on the top floor that hang over the end zones.
But as far as Scott's prompt, when it comes to TD Garden in particular, the only thing that's the same about TD Garden from when it was built is literally the physical concrete of the exterior of the building. Inside the building, every concourse is different. North Station's different. The seats are different. The walls are different. The Jumbotron is as state of the art as it can be. That's brand new. So I mean, everywhere you look, it's new. So I think as far as a shelf life, Scott, I feel like TD Garden as we know it, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be. It's tough to put a number on it. I would say its shelf life is as long as any modern built arena.
Yeah, and if for no other reason than what you mentioned earlier, which is like they're so committed in that space. It's been so built up around and on top of the Garden now that like you would have to knock down so many other things to replace the building that that's not going to happen anytime soon. I'll give credit to someone on.
Every single Boston highway goes like under and around TD Garden. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of true with the old Garden too. Like it's a space.
It's a lot.
Yeah, the West End just completely changed though since the new Garden has been built. It's like a different neighborhood of Boston now than it used to be.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I will give credit to someone tweeted this at me when I tweeted out my just like thinking out loud at Mr. Hockey Pucks. Good username. Made the comparison that basically they see TD Garden now as a Madison Square Garden type arena where it likely gets major renovations down the road, but not completely replaced. And I think that makes a lot of sense because I think the first time I went to MSG was either like 09 or 10. I went to Red Hot Hockey, BU versus Cornell. That was the first time I had been there. And if you go to Madison Square Garden now, and like I was there last season, it is like unrecognizable from 15 years. Like it's like everything, like even more so than all those changes we were just talking about at TD Garden. Madison Square Garden has had so much more change to the point where like if the last time you had been there was 2010 and you went there now, you'd be like, whoa, this is the same arena. Like it
really
looks so much of it has changed.
How about 2019? I was there in 2019 for a comedy show.
I'd say like I don't obviously remember the exact years they went through all their different stages. Like I'm sure you'd still recognize quite a bit, but even just in the last few years, they've made some changes.
I was there in 2023 for Harry Styles. Does that
there
count?
You go. So let's just touch all bases here since you brought it up, Scott. As far as Gillette goes, I think it's kind of similar. They've invested so much in Patriots Place that the new Gillette Stadium, I feel like they would just have to build on top of it, like knock it down and rebuild. And football stadiums the structure is fine. They've also just recently in the last year or two, they've built all new executive suites at Gillette and a new entrance and stuff like that. So again, I feel like Gillette's shelf life is just as long as any other modern NFL stadium.
Those 300 level seats are not good.
But I was gonna say like my complaint with Gillette is one I've had pretty much from the moment it opened, which is there is so much space devoted to luxury suites and corporate suites and all that it has never had a good atmosphere. Like even during the Brady years, never once did you hear, other than just the team was so good, never once did you hear that Gillette Stadium is like one of the most intimidating buildings to play in. Which I will say, like at least TD Garden, you can still have a great atmosphere in there. Like that is not an issue. Gillette Stadium, like the way they built it and like having one end open, which is at least now a little more closed off than it used to be. Like it's just not loud. It just isn't a great atmosphere.
I agree with that. That's fair. I guess I was more so thinking about structure and stability, but I'm also thinking about when they built Gillette, they were obviously simultaneously playing across the street at the old Foxborough Stadium. And it's kind of similar to when the Yankees were playing at Yankee Stadium and they built the new Yankee Stadium next door. But
or
now,
the Garden. I mean, TD Garden was built right next to the old Boston Garden.
Better example. But the difference now is that back then, Patriots Place wasn't there. And the configuration of Patriots Place and the entrance with Gillette, as we know it now, is one. So they couldn't, I don't think they'd have to build it probably on a different side of Patriots Place, which I guess is not impossible. But, and then lastly, let's talk about Fenway Park, which you didn't mention, Scott. But what do we just see Fenway just being just similar, same thing, just always just.
By the way, people, this is still a Bruins conversation because the Bruins have played home games at both Gillette and Fenway. So.
Yeah. Marco Sturm had the overtime winner at Fenway, and he played in the alumni game at Gillette. We're talking about current events here.
So there was, and had I planned better for this conversation, I would have pulled it up, but there was something a few years ago, I think maybe in The Athletic, where Red Sox ownership actually acknowledged that Fenway Park has a shelf life, and they didn't give it like an exact date, but it seemed to be like maybe 30 years in the future or so of like there's actually going to be like structural foundational issues that will eventually lead to Fenway Park needing to be replaced. Which look at that point, like if you're talking, you got 140 years out of a baseball stadium, that is pretty stunning. And obviously they've done a lot of great work. This ownership group has to update Fenway and rejuvenate it without losing like its feel. But I do think it won't be for a while, but I do think eventually we will see the day that Fenway needs to be replaced.
Brian,
well, sorry. I said if the Roman Coliseum is still standing, Fenway's going to still stand. I cannot picture.
Granted, Matthews?
Well, Matthews is, yeah, we all know that one might be short-lived, but I just can't picture a world where, like, you know, sitting down with like my grandkids someday and being like, you should have seen the old Fenway Park. Like, not this new age shit.
Brian, you
like,
gotta have kids before you have grandkids.
That's true. I honestly, I can't even, my mind can't even fathom like a non-Fenway situation in Boston. I just can't. And also from a size perspective, like where would it go? Like, it's almost like you can only fit like the size of what Fenway is. I can't picture a modern day baseball stadium there.
Do you just build the same exact dimensions? Like, but you would have to play somewhere else for, however long it took. That's kind of the dilemma they're having at Matthews. If people don't know what Matthews Arena is, it's the original home of the Bruins when they first started, and it's been the Northeastern hockey facility for a really long time. It's over 100 years old. They're planning on knocking it down and building a new building sometime in the next calendar year. No set date necessarily. The hockey is going to start their first semester and then probably not be their second semester, because I think they're hoping that second semester they get approval to knock down and start to build a new rink. So that's a historic building that I think a lot of people are sad to see it go, but it's structurally not safe, right? Like, I don't know how recent you guys have been in there, but I did the Bean Pod in there this year. I've done many games in there over the last 3 years. And there's sections that are just like barred off because they're not safe for you to stand in. Like, I'm like, what's going on? Yeah, so there's just different things that they don't necessarily 100% tell you why they're barred off, but there's becomes a time where things aren't safe. And that's when I understand knocking it down and having to move on. Whereas TD Garden, they're not even close to having to do that. It would just be more of a cosmetic thing. And I really don't see it happening in the next 5 to 10 years. So
no, definitely not 5 to 10. Just last thing on Fenway, like I think people forget this, or maybe even younger people don't even realize this, but when the Red Sox were last for sale, when this John Henry group bought them in, 01, 02, whenever that was, like there were different groups that had plans for, or at least had blueprints or pitches for a new ballpark. And like, it was very much up in the air at that time whether Fenway Park was going to remain the long-term home. There were proposals of stadiums that, Bridget, to like your point earlier, looked like a new Fenway with the same dimensions and same, still had a green monster and all that stuff. There were ideas for something completely new. There were ideas for staying like in that area, buying up land around there. There were ideas of moving to a different part of the city. Like, so it's been a long time now, but like we did actually kind of go through this where there were like pretty serious discussions about, hey, like this might be coming to the end of Fenway Park's life. And then obviously this group bought the team and decided to renovate and keep Fenway Park. And whatever other complaints you have about their ownership, like they've done a damn good job with that.
My mind would be in an absolute pretzel if one day I'm watching a Red Sox game and the stadium is located in Seaport and right field is the Boston Harbor, kind of like how the San Francisco Giants have theirs set up, and and people are on, canoes, whatever, getting home run balls. I wouldn't even know what I'm looking at. So
generations past, like my great grandpa and my grandpa, they're not, I mean, my great grandpa's not with us, but he would be very upset if that were the case. But by the way, Brian, you asked if we had any final thoughts 20 minutes ago, and Scott,
I did. Well,
I blame Scott, actually.
That's on Scott.
Anyways, like I said, guys, we don't have to get into this now.
Yeah, which we did for 20 minutes.
We'll talk about it next episode for sure.
Nope, I don't think we need to.
All right. We've taken up people's times enough here. So thank you all very much for listening. We'll talk to you on Thursday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.